You are listening to the Love Unplugged podcast, episode 12. Today's episode is all about planning and designing a wedding that is a true reflection of your unique love story and your style. It is so easy to get overwhelmed in the planning process, seeing what everybody else is doing, and then feeling pressured to follow suit in some way. My guest shares her passion for being true to you and her knowledge of the history of wedding traditions, but also how marketing has such a big impact on our choices. I hope this episode encourages you to be bold and to create a truly unique event or experience that you will remember for the rest of your life. You are listening to Love Unplugged, a podcast focused on love in all its forms. I'm your host, Jessica Frigon, hopeful romantic and founder of Revue Blanc. I've found that too often love is set aside or taken for granted, and we tend to forget how to care for ourselves and our relationships in the day-to-day chaos. So let's slow down, tune in, and begin our journey of rediscovering love. From honest heart-to-heart conversations with real couples and knowledgeable guests, to deep dive reviews of new products and services that will help you feel beautiful inside and out. If you're looking for relatable advice or wanting to be inspired by real-life love stories, you've come to the right place. Without further ado, let's get to it. Hi, everybody. I am here with Karen Hopkins of Bride Disrupted, and today we're going to learn all about how to keep your wedding day true to you and your unique love story. It's so easy to feel pressure to plan and design your wedding a certain way to meet society's expectations, but it is so important for you to shut off all that noise and just really listen to what is truly important to you and your fiancé. So welcome, Karen. I am so honored to have you as my guest, and I'm so excited to learn all about your journey to creating Bride Disrupted, but also all that you've learned along the way. But before we start, for those that don't yet know you, I would love for you to share a little bit about who you are.
Thanks, Jess. My name is Karen, and I'm the creator and founder of BrideDisrupted.com. I like to call myself a cultural provocateur in that I see the world in a certain way, and I like to ask a lot of questions about things. So I guess that's sort of the way that I approach my life, by questioning all of the decisions that I make and the way that I approach and live my life. And so with this project of Bride Disrupted, it's my take on the wedding industry and wanting to ask questions about why we do things a certain way. So Bride Disrupted is a resource for asking those questions and providing resources and education for helping other people to ask those same questions and especially people who are looking for alternative ways to do things.
Awesome. I love that. So let's start at the very beginning. I want to know how you got into the wedding industry, how you got into the industry, and was it always something that you were wanting to do?
My journey as a wedding planner was very much an accidental one. I was working as a server, and I was offered a position with the company that I was waitressing with to manage their wedding venue that they had within the hospitality group. I kind of jumped at the chance, but definitely the first wedding that I coordinated at that venue was one of the very first weddings that I had ever actually attended as well. So it was very much a crash course in weddings and the intricacies of all of those, all of the wedding elements, I suppose. At the time, I hadn't really even been to too many weddings as a guest. So it was very much learning a lot about how things work and what you're supposed to do and the things that people find to be really important and what is actually turns out to be the most important on the day just through experience. So no, definitely wasn't something that I always wanted to do. And I learned a lot from it. And actually after I finished working at the venue, I went on to become a full wedding planner and work directly with clients privately outside of that venue space as well. So spent a couple of years doing that and attended many, many weddings in the process.
Wow. So you kind of just jumped in head first. Must have been a lot of questions and things that you weren't familiar with when you first started.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we have some intrinsic knowledge of weddings based on what we've seen in films and TV shows. So there was kind of that baseline there. I was doing lots of study watching Say Yes to the Dress and important shows like that at the time. But yeah, there was a lot that unfolded just experiencing those things with each couple that I worked with. It turned out to be a lot more relationship management than I expected. I found that a lot of the planning sessions I inevitably had with couples felt a lot like couples therapy sessions where we would ask a question, or I would ask a question about a certain aspect of the day or the plans, and there would kind of be this blank or sheepish look that went between the couple, and we would have to sit there and kind of work our way through this big decision-making process. So it was a really fun experience, and it certainly involved a lot more than just actually planning the logistics of a wedding, which I didn't realize was going to be a part of it, but which I ended up really loving.
That's awesome. So through all of this experience working with clients, what actually inspired you to create Bride Disrupted?
So there was one springtime actually where I sat down and I met with about 5 clients over the course of about 2 weeks. And I just noticed there was some real similarities in the conversations that were happening. And that was that people were asking if they had to do certain things or if they should do certain things. And they really wanted to know my opinion about whether I thought that they had to have a cake or whether they should do a first dance, for example. And it just kind of made me realize that everyone was kind of struggling with this same question about these things that they felt like that they had to do, but then there was this common feeling of not wanting to necessarily do those things. So it ultimately felt like what people were really seeking was permission to not go ahead and do those things, and they were just looking at me as this wedding planner or wedding expert to give them permission to do or to not do something. And so that really kind of got me thinking about this idea that who is it that sets these rules for weddings and what they should and shouldn't have in the first place? And, whose job is it to let people know what is and isn't okay? So Bride Disrupted really evolved out of wanting to offer couples an alternative way to think about the way that they could plan a wedding, and, gives them a chance to just ideally forget everything that they currently think about when they think about weddings, and to remove all of those preconceived ideas about what a wedding should be, and to bring it back to basics, to enable them to create a celebration that has true meaning to them and that isn't just feeling like it's a replication of every other wedding that they've seen or been to in the past.
I love that. I found, just like you, when I was doing wedding planning back in the day, I found that it was very similar from wedding to wedding, and couples were asking the same questions. And basically it was following the same pattern or the same timeline every day. And everyone was just I felt like they felt forced to do certain things just because that's what they saw everybody else doing, and that's kind of what was expected. So I definitely like your approach to kind of changing things up.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we don't have a lot of experience with weddings or celebrations that have gone against the grain and done something that's outside of that blueprint that we're so used to. So when if you're the couple at the center of this wedding planning journey, and even if you have decided that, we'd like to do something that's completely unconventional and make something really unique for us, then it's really hard to know where to start. Where do you even begin? There's not a lot of examples out there of events or celebrations that did things differently. So you're really left to your own devices to try and research or figure out ways to make your wedding special, unique, or unconventional. But it's just so hard to find the inspiration to help you figure out what that truly means to you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I know you've done your research, and seeing on your Instagram, there are some traditional aspects of weddings that you've kind of looked into. So I want to know kind of what you've found. What are some common traditions in the wedding industry that you've researched and found what the actual origins of those traditions are that you're surprised by?
Yeah, I think, I mean, basically every ritual you find at a wedding was made up at one time or another. I think what's most interesting is that there seems to be two main camps that these rituals and traditions live within. One is that these rituals were created a very, very long time ago. We're talking like thousands and thousands of years back in the Roman Empire. And they're more kind of folklore traditions or traditions built around a time when there were evil spirits to contend with. So that was things like, carrying garlic. The bride would wear garlic around her neck to ward off evil spirits. And bridesmaids were initially included in wedding processionals, so to dress up and mimic the look of the bride, so that if evil spirits came to meddle with the wedding proceedings, that the bridesmaids would distract that evil spirit from who the bride actually was. So there's that kind of camp, and you can. It's definitely worth going and having a look into the origins of everything from veils to bridesmaids to the best man, wedding cakes, throwing the bouquet, even bouquets themselves. Like all of these things sort of came from somewhere, and it often isn't what you think. But there's this real kind of folklore origins to that side of things. And then on the other side of things, you've got this marketing, these marketing campaigns that kind of birthed traditions in air quotes, which you can't see that I'm doing. So the diamond ring is a perfect example of that. A diamond engagement ring, even engagement rings actually weren't typically worn up until the 50s and 60s. Brides didn't typically wear engagement rings. It was, I believe, in the 60s that De Beers created their very famous diamond campaign, where they first suggested that diamonds were forever, and that this is what should be given as engagement rings, and that even engagement rings were a thing. Same goes for the white dress. It was not typical for brides to wear white dresses up until, I don't have my dates here, so I'm not gonna say the wrong one. But it was a queen that decided, actually, so it was typical for brides to wear red in kind of more royal families who could afford it, until one particular queen decided that she wanted to wear some white lace that she had in her possession, and so she created a white dress to use this one particular piece of lace. And then from that point on, a societal magazine decided that white was the only color to be worn on a wedding day, and it was meant to symbolize purity and virginity and all these things. But that was like the old-timey version of a gossip mag that kind of ran with that story and took it somewhere else. But also, again, up into the 50s, couples generally didn't wear special clothing for the wedding. They often just wore items of clothing that they already had. It wasn't until this like introduction of consumerism and the rise of marketing and advertising in general that all of these kind of aspects of weddings began to be commoditized, that these traditions even got resurrected in the first place, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I mean, I think the point is that any wedding ritual or tradition that you feel compelled to include in your wedding in general has some kind of origin, and it often isn't what you think it is. So, yeah, question and research everything.
Definitely. I'm actually very surprised about the diamond part. To be honest.
Yeah.
And I mean, crazy.
The rules about how many months' salary you're supposed to spend. Like, who made that up? Is that really a tradition? Can we call that a tradition? Like, I don't think so. Like, I think just someone who sat at the head of a company that wanted you to buy their diamond wedding rings was the mastermind behind that.
That's very, very interesting. It's always funny to me because I know marketing's out there and I know how strategic they are, but it always kind of escapes my mind as to how much strategy and planning and research that they do in order to capture their clientele. Like, always fascinates me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you have little things like way back, and this goes back to those folklore kind of examples, brides carried bouquets of flowers because they didn't bathe every week or every day like we do today. So the flowers were there and they would have fresh herbs to mask the stench of the fact that they hadn't bathed for a week or more, and now the bridal bouquet is such an iconic part of the aesthetics and the visual cues that we associate with weddings, and they can be often a really big expense. But when you strip it back to that origins, you can kind of ask yourself, is having a bouquet even really that important? Does this add to the meaning in our celebration? Is this ritual important to include or not, when you really figure out what the origin of that ritual or tradition actually is?
Interesting. So do you have any other thoughts on the wedding industry and marketing and how it impacts couples' choices?
Oh, so many. I mean, I think we live in a time where advertising and social influence just plays a huge factor in the decisions that we make about everything, especially the products we consume, and most certainly the way we feel like we should go about our lives in general. So, I think if you're a couple planning a wedding at this point in time, you are facing a really difficult battle to try and navigate your way through all of the noise of advertising and marketing that is being thrown at you in an attempt to have you spend money on items that you don't want or need. And I think like a perfect example of that is a t-shirt that says bride or bride squad. It's just once you enter this realm of being engaged or being a bride or a fiance, whatever that looks like, you basically become the ultimate consumer for the 6 to 12 months of whatever it is of your engagement period, because you are only a bride for this short amount of time. So the industry sees it as this opportunity to sell you things that you will only need for this short amount of time. So they've got this kind of finite window to throw everything that they possibly can at you. And to kind of, just encourage you to buy items or spend money on things that up until this point maybe haven't actually been that important to you in your life, but now all of a sudden you feel like they should be or they're supposed to be. I think as a woman as well in general, there's a lot of pressure around a bride to present herself in a particular way, especially on her wedding day. It's often kind of advertised as being the pinnacle of her life, and that if any day that a woman will be her most perfect self, it will be on her wedding day. This is the time where we're led to believe that we should be our most skinniest, our prettiest. We have to look the best, which is why we're encouraged to spend a small fortune on a wedding dress and make sure that our makeup and hair is perfect, and sign up for a pre-wedding facial regime, which I only just learned about recently. Bridal boot camps, like weight loss, like all this crazy pressure around being a bride in general. So, there's a lot going on there. I think in general, people want to make money out of us, right? That's how the world world works.
Definitely is.
And unfortunately, when you step into the role of being engaged or into planning the role of being, working towards your wedding, you're inevitably going to encounter a lot of these things. So yes, there is a hell of a lot of pressure to contend with. I do feel for, so I would like to separate that from wedding vendors in particular. Obviously, you and I have come from the world of wedding planners, and my time spent working within the wedding industry, I met some incredible people and very genuine business owners who are ultimately just incredibly down to earth and incredibly honest, and really just looking to help couples have the best wedding that they can possibly have. And there is a lot of commentary I have noticed about the fact that wedding vendors will try to rip you off, and it's just a big cash grab and all of these kinds of things. But I don't see that it's the individual wedding vendors that are trying to force you into spending a lot of money. We have to look at the bigger picture. It's, the societal kind of pressure that is that is the one that's kind of like coercing you into these things. But really, the wedding vendors and the people that you'll likely come across throughout your wedding planning journey are just ultimately trying to help you realize all of these wishes and dreams that you have for your wedding, which may be based on the influence that you've received from the bigger wedding industry and marketing players. But in general, I just like to create that separation because I don't think that wedding vendors are the bad guys, and I don't think they're trying to take your money. I think they're wonderful.
No, I totally agree.
There is certainly a lot of pressure around weddings in general.
I mean, I've heard it so many times from vendors that I know that they go above and beyond. They bend backwards for their clients, and they really ultimately just want to, make their dreams come true on their wedding day. They want to make sure it's stress-free, and they want to make sure that, they plan everything that they want. But everything that they want is coming from a whole different area. It's not typically the vendors that are like creating this vision or creating these wants for the client. It's society and what all these marketing spins are telling them to have and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as a couple, you enter the wedding planning journey with expectations of what your wedding should look like or what it's supposed to look like based on all of these cues and messages that you pick up from life, from being an active participant in this life that we live. And yeah, I agree.
So what tips or advice do you have for couples trying to find their unique style and plan a wedding that is completely true to them in all areas?
So I would suggest that you forget about style and you forget about anything that you've ever seen at any wedding in the past, that you do your best to forget about all of those little rituals and traditions that we spoke about and the things that you feel like should be included in a wedding. And just scrap all of that and first start by sitting down together and figuring out why you're even having a wedding in the first place. So you've already reached the point where you've decided that you'll be married. So that's great. That's a massive decision. That's the biggest decision. And so, okay, you've decided that you would like to have some kind of wedding to honor this decision to be married with some kind of ceremony. But why? Why is that important to you? I think there's a tendency to get caught up in, again, the shoulds and the feeling like, well, I guess we should have a wedding, but you don't have to. So if you don't have to have a wedding, why do you want to have one? Like, what's your purpose behind that? So that could look like all sorts of things. It could be about maybe your families live in different places and really your purpose for your wedding is to introduce your family members and have them get to know each other. Maybe it's has more to do with not your immediate family members, but the friends that you have built into a family. So your family by choice, and you would like to honor and celebrate the community of friends that you have built and how they're an important part of your life. Maybe you want to honor your own parents and the sacrifices they've made for you in their own lives. There's just so many different things we can talk about in terms of what a purpose for having a celebration is in the first place. And once you've done that, you're able to design a celebration around that. So I'll give an example of that. So just say that we live in Vancouver. You live in Vancouver. For me, for example, I'm not from Canada. I'm from Australia. So I live in Vancouver. Let's say my partner is from England, also not from Vancouver, but we live here and we've decided that Vancouver is our home and that we love British Columbia. So our purpose for our wedding may be to introduce our friends from our home countries, our families, to Vancouver and why we've chosen this city to be our home. So now if that's our purpose, when it comes time to then turn that purpose into a celebration, design a celebration around that purpose, we may not be looking at a one-day, 6-hour affair. We might decide that the best way to introduce our families to Vancouver and show off why we love living in British Columbia so much, maybe to rent a minivan and to drive around for a week and take our family members to all of our favorite places around Vancouver and BC. And in the process, we're like getting to know each other and just sharing stories and sharing meals and creating memories, you know? So yeah, just by looking at things like that, you can see how changing your view and about why you're doing something, it kind of opens up all of these opportunities for things that you could be doing if you weren't just so caught up on sort of ticking all the boxes of what a wedding should be.
I kind of like that. That sounds like an amazing trip.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm sure you've done a lot of research, and I kind of want to know some ideas that you've run across or you've come across that you thought were really cool and that were really unconventional, because I don't think that everyone kind of fully grasped when you say, you know, be true to you, be unconventional. You don't have to follow all these trends. It doesn't necessarily mean that, well, just have like a brunch or like do things differently in your reception timeline or something like that. Like you're truly looking at doing, like changing things up completely and doing things differently. So I'd love to hear some ideas that you have found that were truly out of the box and unique.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I think when it comes to terms like have a unique wedding or have an unconventional wedding, it's really hard to decipher what that actually means. And I think there can be some confusion around what actually is an unconventional wedding, you know, and what I've seen, and you've probably seen the same thing, is right now llamas are trending apparently in weddings. I keep seeing llamas in wedding ceremonies. So it's just, you know, you think about, okay, we're going to have a unique wedding. We're going to have this unconventional wedding. What does that mean exactly? And so you start planning a wedding, and instead of like really getting so far, you just end up adding quirky things. So you might end up deciding that, okay, well, we really love festivals, so we're going to serve food from a food truck rather than having a sit-down dinner. So that's cool. But, you know, is that really that unconventional? You know, it just kind of feels quirky at this point, especially as this unique and like quirky kind of themed wedding seems to be trending more and more. I guess Bride Disrupted is asking you to take it one step further. So how else can you recreate a celebration or a wedding that doesn't have any of the elements of what you're used to seeing at a wedding? So, you know, maybe you and your partner just are really into music and singing. And what that looks like is inviting all of your friends to join you for a group sing-along. And you ask folks to bring instruments if they have them, or maybe you're going to create some instruments together beforehand using tin cans and dried rice, and you're going to make shakers, and you're going to teach everyone a couple of songs, and you're going to sit around and play them for a few hours. Maybe you love hiking, and you've decided that the best way that you can think to honor your wedding is to go on a multi-day hike with 10 of your closest friends. And throughout that time, you're going to include some meaningful ceremonial portions where one night you'll sit around the campfire and you'll talk about your values and what it means to you to be in this relationship together and your visions for this marriage. And you'll also spend some time honoring the community of people that you've decided to gather around you. Maybe it's a scavenger hunt. Maybe what's truly meaningful to you is family, and how your family gets together during the holidays and everyone brings their favorite traditional dish to dinner. That's just something that happens within your own family. And so you've decided that you would like to combine the way that both of your families do those traditional holiday things together into one celebration. And it's just a potluck at a park near your house, and everyone just brings food, and you create conversation around the food and the dishes that people have brought. There's really no right way to do it. I think like when it comes to cool ideas, it's like, think of anything that you can think of that you wouldn't normally find in a wedding. I think that's what makes it cool and unconventional.
I love that. It's very different and it's very unique to each love story, right? It just, whatever works for you guys and whatever means something to you guys, that's how you should kind of have your wedding.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if that is like something that's totally unplanned and comes together in the course of 48 hours or in the moment, you decide that this is just something that you want to do right here, right now, then you can do that. You don't have to spend 6 months checking off a bunch of items from a to-do list. It's really whatever is meaningful to you is what you can and should do. And I think, when it comes to wedding ceremonies in particular, I feel as though there's a lot of opportunity to get really creative with ceremonies. This is one thing that seems to remain quite similar from each wedding to the next that you go to. It often feels like when you're planning a traditional wedding, and by traditional I mean like the typical format of weddings that you would see in the Western world today. You get to the point of planning your ceremony, which may be just a couple of weeks out from the wedding, where you sit down with your officiant or whoever it may be to go through the contents of the ceremony. And there's generally a script that they have to work off of because they've done another 100 weddings already this year and more in the course of their careers as celebrants. And there's obviously a few legal things that need to be said as well. But what people often don't realize is that beyond those like 2 legal phrases that need to be said, there's no way that you have to do a ceremony. You can actually do whatever you like. And so one idea that I really love is from the couples who got the paperwork out of the way beforehand. So they went and were married had a civil ceremony before the actual wedding day and just did those kind of legal things, but on the day of their wedding designed a ceremony that was completely unique to them and was just about telling their unique story in a way that was really special. And when you do that, and when you remove the legalities from the day of the wedding, you can also choose whoever you want to host the ceremony as well. So you could have a grandparent, a best friend, a mutual friend, whoever you want, siblings. Good friends of mine actually had their 2 sisters do it together, which was really special. They both came from very different cultural backgrounds and religious backgrounds. So for them, it was a really special way to do the things that they wanted to do without having to adhere to any religious or cultural rules in air quotes.
Love that. That's awesome. So I want to talk about these things that I found on your website. And I'd love for you to share a little bit more about it. So I've seen some pretty cool things that you offer. You offer a mastermind. You also offer a very unique checklist I'd like you to talk about. So if you can just talk a little bit more about that and where people can find them on your website.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my vision for bridedisrupted.com is not to be just another wedding blog that's full of advertising of things that you should go and spend a bunch of money on. The idea is not to, coerce you into purchasing anything that you don't want or need. So really the site is all about educational resources to help you think outside the box when it comes to your wedding and give you some practical skills for managing relationships and all of the tricky kind of conversations and situations that come up as you're wedding planning. So we have a free workshop about how to say no when you feel pressured to say yes, which you can imagine is probably a pretty common occurrence that comes up. It's not only pressure from external influences like the wedding industry and advertisers, but you've got a lot of relationships to deal with. Parents who may be contributing financially to the wedding can have a lot of opinions about what should and should not be included. So this course is really all about creating some good boundaries and how to set boundaries and stick to them. So that is one option. There's a bunch of other free tools, and we're kind of adding more stuff all the time. One of my favorites is the unchecklist. So one of the first things you do when it comes to actually getting started with your wedding planning is to Google how wedding planning checklist, or maybe you go to Pinterest and look for a wedding planning checklist to download and find one that makes the most sense to you. And then what you end up with is, a multi-page document that has a couple hundred to-do items on it, things that you're supposed to do in the lead up to your wedding. But I think what happens on these, when you get these checklists, there's a lot of stuff on there that is a bunch of crap, really, and is totally unnecessary. And maybe a lot of it is stuff that you would never have thought that you had to do. But because it's there on this checklist in front of you that someone else has written as the gospel of the things that you're supposed to do as you plan your wedding, you suddenly kind of feel this pressure that you should do it too. So, yes, the unchecklist is about going against all of that, and it's really designed to help you forget about all of those to-do items and all of the expectations and the visions of things you've seen of weddings past, but to come back to that idea I spoke about earlier about finding your purpose for why you're having a wedding in the first place. So it's not about starting with a checklist with a bunch of ideas for how to plan somebody else's wedding. It's really about setting the intention about how you'll plan your wedding, and ultimately you would create your own checklist based on the ideas that you come up with when you first sit down and think about the purpose for having a wedding in the first place. But yeah, there's a bunch of tools around the website for things like that. It's all educational, all really helpful, and lots of good free stuff on there for you.
I love that. That checklist. I mean, I've even struggled with the checklist and creating it. I'm like, this is just an encompass everything humanly possible that you can think of that somebody might want to do in a wedding. And then you get a bride that downloads it and she just may feel like she has to do it just because it's on there. But it's not really for everyone specifically.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that. I'm going to have to download yours and see what it's all about. I'm definitely intrigued about it.
Perfect. Yes. Let me know what you think.
Yes. So I know you're working on some new things right now. Are you able to share anything about that yet?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm in the process of publishing a book. It's hopefully going to be out in August this year, possibly September. But we're just in the last stages of editing and designing and publishing this book, all about everything that we've spoken about today. It's about helping you to define that purpose for why you're even having a wedding in the first place. And then it really guides you through the process of how to turn that purpose into a vision for a really amazing and memorable and meaningful experience for you. So yeah, that's the one key thing that we're really working on now. And then there'll be another book launched hopefully later this year about just conscious relationships in general.
Awesome. I can't wait to see that.
Me too.
It's going to be pretty interesting. Considering our conversation today, I kind of want to learn more.
Great. Excellent.
All right. So if anybody wants to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so bridedisrupted.com is where all of that juicy, educational, informative content is housed. Of course, there'll be a book coming soon, which you'll also be able to find at the website, bridedisrupted.com. And social handles, we're hanging out on Instagram at bride.disrupted. So come and join the conversation. It's a pretty fun, playful space. It's not full of wedding images. There's a bit of that, but there's also some other fun stuff going on too. And I just would like to invite anyone who isn't a bride to come along as well. And what I mean by that is I think there's a lot of, when it comes to weddings, there is obviously a lot of emphasis put on the bride in general, but Bride Disrupted is all about disrupting that bridal culture and the idea that a wedding day is all about her, the bride. And, it's the Bride Disrupted is inclusive to everyone. So even if you are not a bride, you should come along, and I think you'll find something of value there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Karen, for taking the time to chat with me. I loved learning about all the stuff that you've learned along the way creating Bride Disrupted. And thanks for sharing all this insight. This is amazing. I love your perspective on this. I've always kind of found that it's important for people to plan something that's very true to their story and true to them. So this just kind of solidifies that.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, this was so fun. I love talking about this stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'm Jessica, and thanks for tuning in today to Love Unplugged, the podcast. If there are any questions or topics you'd love answered on the show, head on over to revueblanc.com and share your request with me. If you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast and share it with a loved one. Your feedback means the world to me, and the community we've created is what fuels our discussions here. After all, this is all for you. Join me next time for another Unplugged conversation.